In 2024, I had just gotten back on my feet after a rough run from 2020 that just never let up. I felt betrayed when I realized my debt was catching up with me. I was a public school teacher. It was such an old debt. Why couldn't they just leave me alone? I was still in a pretty shaky place mentally, and I'm not at all claiming that this kind of thinking is healthy or ethical. But I was definitely in a pit of despair when it came to finances. I had just gotten to a place where I could pay rent regularly. I thought it would be 6 to 8 months of garnishments and then it would be over, but I was wrong. It would be more than 2 years before I would be free of these major debts that had been taken to court. A little backstory how I got here. In 2019, I left a job without a plan. I was burned out, dealing with chronic health issues, and just needed some time away from serious work to figure things out. So I signed up with Lyft. During the pandemic, a friend became a roommate and we locked down until July when I ran out of money. I continued doing gig work, not really knowing what I was going to do with my life. In 2021, my mother passed away from COVID after years of illness, and I felt like I had nothing tying me down. I started looking at teaching positions overseas, mostly Korea, and started making plans to leave. During this time, I wasn't really worried about debt at all. I knew if I was in Korea, they couldn't touch that money, but teaching overseas was my best option at the time for making a living, saving money, and eventually paying off debt, since housing would be paid for. I decided to teach as a substitute for a while to strengthen my job experience for teaching overseas. But within a few days, I started to see a path open to a teaching career here. I got an annual sub job in English as a second language, which paid a lot better, and realized all I needed was to pass a praxis test to get a provisional license. Then I would have 3 years to obtain full licensure. My health got really bad, and I started missing a lot of work, however, and didn't make it through that school year. Long story short, I went back to DoorDash, found out I had cancer, had surgery, recovered, almost got evicted because I could not pay rent, and then passed the praxis and got an ESL teaching job at the same school I had been a substitute at. So back to 2024, I had 3 creditors waiting. The summons came and I had a choice: either try to fight them in court, which frankly I did not have the mental or financial energy for after everything in the last few years, including my cancer surgery, or accept the reality. I accepted it. I knew I owed the money, and trying to delay it would just prolong the stress. The reality is I wouldn't have had much of a chance to fight it in court anyway. Virginia law is quite clear. For most consumer debts, they can garnish the lesser of 2 amounts: 25% of your disposable earnings, your pay after mandatory taxes, or the amount by which your disposable income exceeds 40 times the minimum wage. Since my salary as a public school teacher put my disposable earnings above that legal threshold, trying to argue financial hardship would not have worked. The 25% was going to be taken. The 3 debts that resulted in court judgments and totaled nearly $15,300 were my breaking point. Now, I know to many people, $15,300 is a small debt, but in my situation, coming off unemployment, battling illness, and struggling to simply keep an apartment, this total was crushing. It was the absolute maximum level of pressure my fragile, newly rebuilt life could handle. These are the debts that triggered the garnishments. Debt collector A, original judgment of $5,245.37. This one's now paid in full. Debt collector B, original judgment of $3,841.31. Now $1,987.16 remaining. And a credit card debt C, original judgment of $6,192.61. This is my current focus because the balance is still $3,483.88, and a new round of garnishment started with my most recent paycheck. Since I'm paid twice a month, that 25% chunk comes out of every single paycheck, and yeah, it hurts. Here's where the imperfect budget mental shift comes in, though. For a long time, the garnishment felt like a heavy punishment, a constant reminder of past mistakes. But I realized that fighting it would have consumed all my energy and focus. which I needed just to rebuild my life after surgery and finally getting back into a full-time job. I had to let go of the anger and the shame. I made peace with it by changing how I viewed it. I decided to see the garnishment not as a hardship, but as autopay on debt. It is a consistent, forced payment that I don't have to think about. It is uncomfortable, but it is reliable, and it guarantees that this debt is slowly but surely going away. The interesting thing about this debt process is the unexpected financial win. While it came from a judgment, those consistent, forced payments are showing up on my credit report as payment history. Little by little, it is improving my credit score, which gives me more independence and financial stability for the future. So 3 years ago, I was in the pit of despair, thinking about leaving the country to run from my debt. Now, by facing it and accepting this necessary step, I'm booking a cruise and building a cushion. That is the journey of the imperfect budget. If you have ever felt trapped by debt or judgment, or are just rebuilding your life after a difficult time, you are not alone. Subscribe to see my monthly debt progress and comment below with one thing you've made peace with in your own financial life. And thanks for watching.